Hello, everyone. I am so delighted to welcome you to this Lunch and Learn webinar about the Land Institute's upcoming civic science project called the Perennial Atlas Project. My name is Aubrey Streit Krug. I'm the director of the Perennial Cultures Lab here at the Land Institute. So greetings from the Smoky Hills of central Kansas today. And as many of you may know, the Land Institute is an agricultural research nonprofit organization that's working with partners around the world to develop perennial grain crops. And one of the ways that we're doing that is in collaboration with civic scientists. So this project webinar will talk a little bit about this opportunity. And our plan for today is to share a little bit about the purpose of civic science and the Perennial Atlas Project in particular, to go over what you need to be able to join the Perennial Atlas Project, and talk a little bit about some of the potential benefits of being a civic scientist, and to have a lot of time for questions and answers about the project. It's been really fun to see in the chat the wide range of places you all are joining from. So I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already, and to browse that to see who else is here. You're also welcome to add questions anytime into the chat. Some of my wonderful colleagues at the Land Institute, including Reese Napick, who's a civic science technician working directly on this project, are here with us and will help coordinate questions so that we'll be able to bring them up and discuss them as a group, or to provide answers to you during the call. And before we dive in to the presentation part, I wanted to point your attention to the image on the screen here, captured and shared by one of our civic scientists who works with the perennial oilseed crop, Silphium. And this civic scientist is an artist in Kansas City, and posted about, I'm not sure I'm doing it right, but I'm doing it. And that spirit of learning, curiosity, experimentation, and joy is what we bring to civic science as researchers, and what our civic scientists bring as well. So civic science is a method for learning about crops and how they perform in different places. It's a participatory method by which people who aren't professional scientists participate in science. So that's where the civic part comes in to science. So here on this screen, you can see one of our researchers, our lead perennial oilseed scientist, David Van Tassel, in a greenhouse in Salina, holding up a future perennial oilseed crop, Silphium, and gazing at the roots. You can see a visiting artist checking out those roots as well. So at the Land Institute, we grow and test different perennial grains that we're developing, domesticating, but we're interested in understanding how these future perennial grains do in other locations that are not the greenhouses in Salina or our nearby test plots. So that's where we're interested in working with people in other locations to grow these small plots of future perennial grains in their backyards or community gardens or neighborhood centers or schoolyards, to understand how these plants do there, to collect data, and to get to know and interact with these plants in the context of their communities and start building their own relationships with them. So from the greenhouse out into the field, you can see this is another social media post from, in this case, a perennial wheat civic scientist, thinking about the kind of intergenerational learning and the different setting in a backyard in which someone is growing and testing these future perennial grains. The purpose in particular of this new Perennial Atlas civic science project is for us to grow and test this method. We've been developing civic science projects for several years with different perennial grain crops, and we're interested in broadening that and inviting and engaging more people, in particular across the continental US. So civic scientists help collect and share data, working with a digital platform to be able to submit that data, and as well as mailing back physical samples for us to study as researchers. So we're interested through this project of helping motivate people to join this process of discovery, to improve the digital platform that we use to better support civic scientists in their learning, to help build civic science in ways that are more democratic and inclusive and engage successfully more people, make it easier for people to join and participate. We want to deepen the ways that people engage by trying out different types of data collection. And ultimately, all the data that civic scientists share will be compiled into a set of maps that help us understand how different future perennial grain crops look and do in different geographic locations. Ultimately, those data sets are valuable for researchers as they make decisions about processes of breeding and domestication, and as they understand the ecology and the ecological processes supplied by these deeply rooted perennial grain crops that we hope to create staple foods with, and that we can better understand how to support people to be part of these processes. So really testing this method and creating these large data sets to support researchers are what we're doing in this project. The requirements for civic scientists are a willingness to learn. We as researchers are learners, and we're really excited to collaborate with people who bring a similar enthusiasm for experimenting together with us. We are looking for people who are interested in plants and agriculture, not that people have to have previous experience, but are bringing that interest. And people to participate do need a place to be able to steward a garden-sized plot for several years. This is a 3-year project, which people will be planting in 2024 and moving through 3 growing seasons with these perennial plants, as well as some of their annual counterparts. So having access to a place where this can be stewarded over time is important. We're looking for people across a wide range of locations and geographies to understand how these plants and future crops do in those different places. And people need to have a willingness to access a digital platform and to give us feedback on that, as well as other things. So the image you see here on this slide is a kind of journey map of the project that walks people through how we initiated it, the different plants that we're working with, in this case, the perennial oilseed, a perennial legume, and perennial flax, as well as their annual counterparts, shows a little bit about the process of planting, tending, collecting data, sharing stories, connecting in a digital community, learning, and then the return of those results over the time. So we have a short video that walks you through each of these steps if you want to get a better sense of what happens each piece of the civic science process. I also wanted to share a little bit about some of the benefits that our previous and current civic scientists have noticed by participating in civic science projects. We provide a lot of learning materials and opportunities for people, and being able to access those has been something that people have enjoyed. Folks who have maybe visited the Land Institute or research plots or heard about perennial grains, but haven't got to experience them firsthand. Over time, this can be a really rewarding way to have those kinds of hands-on interactions and actually see how these future crops might do in your place. We've also received positive stories about people engaging in the kinds of challenges and the joys of scientific discovery. Things go according to plan and things don't go according to plan. We notice what we predicted and we find different results. So being able to join with us in that process and contribute meaningful data for scientists to work with and for civic scientists to better understand has been really fun. We also have heard from our current civic scientists that contributing in some active, hands-on way to building a more climate resilient food future, thinking about the types of benefits to future generations that these contributions to research can make now has been a positive thing. And people's backyard plots and community garden interactions have sparked lots of conversations with their friends or neighbors or family about what they're doing and why, which are really chances for teaching as well as learning. and for caring for your place by planting these perennials and building a kind of deeper awareness of this place in which you're situated. And then finally, we've heard a lot from people about how building these connections, both with plants firsthand and the kinds of insect observations you see from the civic scientist who shared a lovely pollinator photo from her silphium plot, and building connections with people in other places and the broader research community, really joining and contributing to the perennial grain agriculture research community and having those contributions be valued has been really fun for people. So I'm going to pause for a moment here and turn the mic over to our collaborator and future civic scientist, Sheena. And Sheena hasn't joined Civic Scientists before, but we recently connected about this Perennial Atlas project, and she's going to be one of the civic scientists. And I thought it might be fun for people to hear her story about what is drawing her to participate in this project. So Sheena. Let's see if you can get unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Only the host could unmute me, so thank you for that kind introduction, Aubrey. Hello, everyone. My name is Sheena Mason. I live in Oneonta, New York, and I'm a general geek when it comes to all things science. A professor in an English department, but if I wasn't as passionate about literature and social sciences as I am, I would have been something like an astrophysicist. So when I say I'm into science, I'm really into science. So that's initially what drew me in and sparked an interest and passion for participating in any way that I can help support the project. But additionally, when I was thinking about, number one, how I could participate and why I should participate, I was thinking, I think most about the mental health aspect of all of this. As someone who has spent much of her adult life in urban spaces, but grew up in small town, rural New York, to say that I love nature would be an understatement. And I recognize that there's a lot of literature that shows that the benefits for being out in nature, for growing, right, for doing this thing that some folks call grounding, being barefoot in the ground, on the ground, all of these things have long-term impacts that I'm interested in. Number one, building for myself, but also building for my students. I'm sad to say that a student committed suicide just a couple of days ago, and this is the third student that my campus community has lost in this manner this semester. And I find that more and more and more of my students, all of these really younger generation folks, are struggling in ways that I myself didn't necessarily experience, that my peers didn't experience. And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? Like we could talk about current events, we could talk about the impact of the pandemic, but for a lot of reasons, people are struggling more these days than seemingly they have before. So I was thinking about what I could do that could potentially benefit some of my students and also the broader campus community. And as an English professor, I had to get pretty creative to do that. Like, how can I tie civic science, growing stuff? How can I tie that to an English class? And I landed on the idea of connecting Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, a collection of essays, to the Civic Science Project as independent research opportunities for students. And I'm really excited to have this sort of experiential learning opportunity for students, as well as recognizing the kind of psychological benefit that can have on them. Even getting more sun, I think, would be beneficial to myself and to others. So I'm really looking forward to participating for those reasons. And I'm inviting everyone within the sound of my voice to participate for similar reasons. There is a sort of self-interested reason in which I'm participating that I think can get missed. And oh, I should mention, so I'm partnering with my school's Office of Sustainability, and they're giving me a small plot in our community garden. So that's where the plot will be. And that also leads me to feel a certain amount of joy and selflessness, because as the crops grow, everyone on the campus community who sees that garden, or everyone even in the town, right, who passes by, will be able to benefit from the beauty, the vibrancy of the space, as well as the beauty and the energy that I think pollinators will help bring to the space. So at once recognizing that I'm helping myself, and that I'm also helping other people around me, even if in a seemingly small way. And then the bigger impact I see this having comes down to what Aubrey was mentioning when it comes to the question of, I think increasing self-sustainability is of interest to me personally and my family. For example, I dream of having enough land to grow my own vegetables and herbs, right? I want to have a chicken coop. I'm going to get some eggs. That's of interest to me. And I think people are increasingly going down that path and exploring what that can look like. And the idea that anything I do can help scientists determine what kinds of crops can grow where and what that looks like, and that kind of data can help help the climate in, I guess, some kind of impactful way, right? I think that's also why I'm interested in inviting others to come and join and be civic scientists. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you, Sheena. We're really looking forward to collaborating with you. And I just want to underscore what Sheena shared about the purpose of this project and our larger work. You know, as the Land Institute is working to develop these future staple perennial grains that can support the kinds of ecological services that we as humans need, along with all other beings on the planet, to survive, and to be able to provide tasty and crops and foods for people. That's a really long-term prospect, but we can invest in the types of research that can accelerate that, and that can bring us together in really rewarding and satisfying ways, and grow the research community by being able to study these crops and in these different contexts right now. So it's a long-term game and research agenda, but we have the chance to move it more quickly and to grow it more deeply in ways that include and welcome more people into creating the kinds of future that we want. So I feel like being able to engage can be a really rewarding way to grow that future in the direction in the face of everything that we are all grappling with. So thank you for sharing that, Sheena. And I just wanted to do a little bit of a rapid fire Q&A while people think of potential more questions that you would like to ask about the project. And if there are particular things you want to hear about, by all means, add them to the chat or put them in the Q&A. We'll go back and forth. I wanted to share briefly a little bit of an image of a test plot that we've been developing for the Perennial Atlas Project. So that's what you see on the left here. We experimented this year by actually building out on one of our research stations example of what these plots might look like. So you can see different plants grown in small squares in about a 15 by 15 section. We tried out weed cloth in the test plot and determined it did not work well. So we're not planning to do that in the project, why we learn. But you can see the about size and scale of that and the way that things might be organized. And you can see that some plants are doing better or worse than others in that context. And this sort of messy and beautiful reality, but within a contained and neat space, might be contrasted with what one of our civic scientists drew as a coloring book page illustration of her experience in a plot. And so we have an ideal, and we also are working with this reality and being able to connect our current reality with a future ideal is the gap we're trying to bridge here. So for some rapid fire questions and answers, what will the plots look like? We're imagining about 15 by 15 plot size. People can have 1 or 2 plots in their places. And within those smaller squares for these different perennial crops and annual counterparts, as well as a kind of control square where we might look at some of the weed ecology. In terms of the data collection, it will be a wide range of things, including observations about plant health, harvesting and returning seeds, noticing pollinators, as well as different pests or pathogens, diseases, or issues with plant health, taking samples of those, sampling soil, and being able to pay attention to the types of weather and climate that are happening as well. And it will be data related to civic scientist experiences, the stories that you might have about your interactions with this plot, the surprising observations you make, the feedback that you have to give about the project, and your stories about what you're learning. So will these plants do well in everyone's locations or in your particular location? We don't know, which is why we're interested in testing them. We have a sense of the different ranges and growing possibilities for these different crops, but in many locations, these future perennial grain crops may not have been grown before. And so we're interested in understanding how they do, how they survive, what types of challenges might be faced. And if they don't do well, that's really valuable data for us to have too. So that's part of the challenges along with the joys here. In terms of time you might expect to invest in the project, probably several hours a week during the growing season. So from spring, summer, and fall, being able to make observations, to weed and water as needed, to submit data, to learn about what's going on. The exact amount of time will vary based upon your interest and conditions, but there will be a time commitment. And especially at the kind of establishment phase of getting your plot ready and getting those, especially perennials, established well, there might need to be more time to make that happen. Will you get to eat, cook, or bake with perennial grains? So this particular project, you'll be harvesting seeds and sending them back. So you won't be using the seeds for culinary purposes, mostly as part of the project. We're interested in studying things about the plants and the ecology and your learning. However, in previous projects, we've been able to provide some optional, fun, kind of complementary opportunities to experiment with eating perennial grains. And we hope that we could be able to do that as part of this project too. And of course, the reason that we're interested in domesticating and breeding perennial grains is to provide human food. So we are interested in growing future projects that involve people in these culinary aspects. In terms of the materials being provided, the seeds and seedlings, along with a variety of educational resources, print and digital forms will be shared with people. Also, different tools that you might need for data collection and signage and instructions. We also have small yearly stipends available for participants and civic scientists in this project. Civic scientists will need to be able to use basic tools to set up their plots and to water them and things like that. The stipends might be able to help you gain access to some of those things if you don't already have them. Can I participate as part of a community organization or school, or as part of a group rather than an individual? Yes, that would be wonderful. You are more than welcome to have a group of people stewarding one plot, or to work with others in your community or your institution around this. Will I be able to make art or do experiments with my plot based upon my own interest? Yes, we hope that these civic science plots spark your inspiration and connect with your interest. We ask that if you're interested in doing other forms of data collection or experiments with what's happening in your plot, that you just coordinate with that with us so we can make sure that they mesh well together and neither of those get compromised. How will you study learning in the project? So we are really interested in being able to support people in learning and studying how that learning takes place, especially in relationship to people's local places. So there are opportunities to share stories, to share feedback, and we analyze and share that back and then make changes in the project based upon what we're noticing. We also provide a variety of engagement opportunities digitally and through in-person site visits. So there is a chance researchers can visit you and your plot to better support you and to better understand how civic scientists in this project learn, so that we can improve the project year over year, and we can test and improve our broader agricultural civic science method. Finally, how do you select who gets to be a civic scientist? We are really thrilled to have such broad interest in the project. And when people fill out the interest form, as many of you may have done, there's a chance to share which particular crops you're interested in, as well as your location. For this project, we are really interested in having geographic diversity and a wide range of locations, and not kind of oversaturating a particular location. So we are select people based upon being able to provide that range of locations. If you aren't selected for this project, or if this project isn't the right fit for you in terms of your time and your interest, you can still fill out the interest form, and you might find a future project that is a better fit. People who fill out the interest form, we stay in touch with as new project opportunities arise. There might be other ways in other current projects or in future projects that we partner or collaborate. So sharing your interest helps us ensure that we stay in touch with you. All right, so rapid fire is done, and we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I'm going to ask my colleague Reese to help me identify if there are some particular questions that we might need to answer. And I think I can look maybe first at the Q&A here. So I see in the Q&A a question from Joan. Do these crops require ongoing irrigation in climates with less than 12 inches annual precipitation? Great question. And certainly the water use of these plants is really an interesting question for us. I'm happy to answer this, but I also see David Van Tassel on the call. David, is this something that you'd like to speak to?
Hi, Aubrey. I was sort of typing on chat at the moment. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, of course. So the question is, do these crops require ongoing irrigation in climates with less than 12 inches annual precipitation? And just maybe more generally, if you could speak to the kind of water use question related to perennials.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about it would be that whatever it takes to grow crops in your area is probably what you're going to need to do for these plants. So if you're in the middle of a desert, but people can grow crops in the desert if they irrigate, probably you're going to need to water. Like they're not magic. They need mostly what most crops need. Now we think a lot of them can use resources more efficiently, but that doesn't mean they don't use resources at all. So but we don't have a hard and fast, we don't expect people to measure exactly how many acre feet they're putting on, or and some people might have ways of growing that are a little more water thrifty than other people, and that's okay. We just want to, there's going to be a lot of variation from one side of the street to the other in everything: soil type, shading, slope, and that includes the people too, how they manage their plots and how often they water. They water once a week, nice and deep, or every day. So that's just part of the complexity of this kind of study. That the ideal thing was if we could record some of that, like if someone is watering pretty regularly, that is something we should know about, and we should keep track of that.
Thank you, David. And I think that also speaks to another question I see in the Q&A about if we use it both annual and perennial plots, can we use drip irrigation? Yeah, so we're really interested in just being able to understand how you're managing the plots. And as David said, being able to record that and share it back with us is something that's really helpful. We know there's going to be a lot of variation across different places. I'm also seeing several questions in the chat in the Q&A about folks who are located outside the United States and are interested in this project. For this particular Perennial Atlas project, we only have the capacity to be able to ship seeds and seedlings to people who are located within the US. So we're looking at the continental 48 states and Alaska. However, the Land Institute is growing a wide range of international collaborators. So you can definitely check out our website to see where those folks are located in terms of current collaborations. And we'd love to hear from you if you are outside the US and would be interested in partnering or learning more about perennial grains. This particular project won't be the right fit, but there are other opportunities. All right, I see several questions about deer. And this is something we've experienced in other civic science projects, just challenges with herbivory or different critters finding these seedlings very tasty. David or Reese, would you like to speak to that question?
I can, just from my experience with the demo plot. So as part of preparation for this project, I built that demo plot, as you saw earlier in the slides. For the most part, I found that deer were more interested in soy than anything else. I would hesitate to call any of them deer resistant necessarily, but I grew them in a plot that's without a fence and in an open field pretty nearby a wooded area. So I had success with just we had used some deer repellent pellets, and that seemed to do well enough. And yeah, we've talked about including those in the season start kit as well. So yeah,
I think it's another case where people will have to use their expertise and local knowledge. It's tempting to say, oh, well, just let nature take its course, because that's what we want to learn about. But it's true that very small plots are much more likely to get decimated by something like deer than, 500 acres of something. So yeah, it may not be transferable to sort of future agricultural knowledge, and it may be that we do have to take some steps for a very small plot like this with very large herbivores.
Great. David, while you're on, I also see a variety of questions related to planting directly versus creating raised beds, as well as questions around fertilizers along with the water use. So I wonder if you just want to talk a little bit more about what kind of common parameters we are looking for, in addition to knowing the range of management practices here.
Well, I don't know. Overall, I'd say do things the way that it makes sense to you, given your situation and given what we'll tell you about these crops and how big they're going to get and things like that. Maybe a way of weaseling out of that a little bit is to say we will try to take note of what's been asked here, and that really helps us think about it and get back to you with more specific instructions. Like, some of these are questions we hadn't even thought about. So this is part of the whole point of this, is to get lots of brains working on something, right?
Totally. And I'll just also add that this type of collaborative kind of design of what it looks like for people to work with these plants in their places not only helps us prepare to support people, but also helps inform the types of possibilities for the plot design. So hearing from a civic scientist who has a particular question, opportunity that we haven't worked with before can spark this kind of creativity, as well as different options for adapting the research or exploring other questions or additional particular questions based upon the expertise or the situation of that person. So this is, I think, a good example of how the civic science process really works. We are co-learning and designing this together. I see some other questions about multiple crops and with flax in particular. So I'll just mention that the Land Institute has breeding programs and domestication programs actually for the perennial oilseed, silphium, that we're working on for this project, and for the perennial legume, sainfoin, that we're working on. And this will be the first civic science project where we've worked with perennial flax, which is something our collaborators are developing. So I again might ask David to speak to this. I think you are more familiar with those folks and some of the uses of flax.
So the question is just why are we including flax? Or okay,
why flax,
flax,
and then whether the flax stalks will be available for other use like fiber.
Oh, yeah, flax is a huge genus with many species in it, and obviously one of them has been domesticated and is grown for both fiber, we call that linen, when we harvest the fiber, and flaxseed is the grain basically. And my understanding, this is something that's grown not around me. I've seen it growing in Saskatchewan, and probably some other Manitoba and North Dakota. But my understanding is there are varieties that are very tall that are grown for the fiber, for linen, and maybe they don't bother harvesting the seeds, and other varieties that are probably shorter and produce more seeds, and those are more for the for producing the flax grain, the flax that you might see in the store for putting in bread, and has some health benefits. So the wild flax that's being domesticated as a new grain, my guess is it won't be as tall as those domesticated fiber crops, fiber flax varieties, and so it's probably not going to be as good for trying to make cloth or thread or something out of it. At least the ones I've seen, our collaborators in North Dakota, when I've seen their perennial flax plots, they don't immediately jump out at you as a fiber crop, which usually are really tall and skinny. So I think you could try for sure, and many plants have lots of fibers in them that could be used for all kinds of things. Just happens to be that flax tends to have long fibers and long straight stems. But the thing that we've been more interested in is the grain, and the oil quality is very special for flax, and that's one reason to include it. It has more of the omega-3 fatty acids than most other grain crops, or any other grain crop maybe. Some of the tree nuts are probably just as good, but harder to grow, much more expensive. So that's probably why we're interested, and our collaborators are interested in flax.
Wonderful, thank you. I see a question about whether plots are limited to the 15 by 15 size. So we will want to keep keep the plot design kind of consistent from place to place as best as we're able. So there's an opportunity to have a couple of the 15 by 15 plots. So that might be a way to have larger plots, is to kind of multiply them, and we'd be excited about folks having to. For people who are interested in growing other future perennial crops or at larger scales, we can definitely also talk about that. It will probably be outside of this project, but certainly there are opportunities to discuss that. I also see a question in the chat about whether it's okay to have other common garden plants in the area, if you're growing sunflowers in your garden, for instance, as well as in this research plot, or whether there might be concerns about plants from this plot, the research plot with Perennial Atlas, seeding into neighboring plots in a community garden. And I think in both of those cases, things should be okay. We're not too worried about or facing challenges around different kinds of cross-pollination in this project. And we haven't seen a lot of issues with a lot of spread from these plants. It helps that you're going to be harvesting the seed and sending that back to the Land Institute, so that limits that as well. But that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that, and we wouldn't want there to be issues. So we'll support you in getting your plots in order in that way. I also see a really good question about what kinds of records folks will be keeping over the 3 years, what data they'll be recording, and the frequency. And as Reese wrote in the chat, we work with a digital platform that's open access called CitSci, that's hosted at Colorado State University, that helps us gather different civic science data. And we'll have a range of different kind of protocols, from collecting samples that you'll put in a prepaid mailing envelope and send back to us, to taking photos or measurements and entering those into a digital form and putting those into the platform. So the exact frequency will depend on people's interest. Part of what we're interested in learning in this project are what types of data civic scientists like to collect, are skilled at collecting, find fun and enjoyable, and can do at a really high degree of quality. So we're going to try a lot of different things, and what people are able to do and willing to do will be important for us. You can also get a kind of sense of what we've done in other civic science projects by looking at the field guides on our website. You can see we provide a season timeline with different asks for what types of data collection happen on a kind of monthly basis, for instance, ranging from everyone takes a photo of their plot on this day to go out and check, and if you notice something surprising or concerning, send us that information. So we really try to help people understand what the kind of baseline could be. If you do nothing else, do these things, it'll be a success, and to provide opportunities for people who are really excited to go deeper and try out other forms of data collection. So there are lots of possibilities, and we are excited to work with you. And we will be providing kind of overview of the season, lots of instructional materials, and about how to collect that data, including kind of video examples, what it looks like, photos and things like that, and are available to provide support along the way. And maybe the last thing I'll mention is that people in our current civic science projects have, of course, faced different challenges and changes in their lives and their places. A storm comes through, something happens with one's family and they have to step away for a little bit. People are able to adapt, and we understand that those life circumstances can change. And this is part of what we know is the civic science method, is working with people who are doing this type of care work on a really generous and volunteer basis for collaboration, means that the projects need to be adaptive and flexible. So we are more than willing to work with you around that, and excited to learn with you and to learn how to better support the kinds of data collection that will be valuable. All right. Let's see, we have some questions about the plot themselves, should the plots be level or is some slope okay? Generally, it will be easier if they're level. A little bit of slope will be, I think, okay, but it will be simplest probably to have them be pretty level, pretty accessible, and full sun, as well as depending upon your location, having access to water might be helpful. I see some questions about fertilizers, whether specific fertilizers are going to be used. And Amy June explains the full sun exposure will be helpful. And we are just interested in being able to understand what type of amendments are going to be used. So keeping track of how you manage the plots will be part of the ask that we have for you. Another question about the 15 by 15 square layout, is that important? Or could longer rectangles work? I think there could be some room for flexibility here, but as I mentioned earlier, we're interested in having consistency across places if possible. So if that's something where you're selected and participating, we'd be happy to talk with you more one-on-one about that.
Aubrey, I can
oh, go ahead.
jump in and say just
Please.
a little bit about that. The most important thing is going to be the small plots. So there'll be a number of, a little plot of sunflower and a plot of flax and so forth. And those need to be planted in a very specific arrangement that's very consistent. The distance between the plots is up to you. And we were estimating sort of 15 by 15 is what it would take. But yeah, you could make them in a long skinny line or in a square or spread out a little bit more. So there is quite a bit of flexibility there.
Thank you for clarifying that, David. Very helpful. I also see a question about whether the plots need to be the same ground each year. For the perennials, yes, but as David just explained, there could be a little bit of flexibility as with the kind of annual counterparts that will be replanted on a yearly basis. And David, I don't know if you also want to speak to some of these questions around solar arrays and daily solar hours needed for the grow period, what full sun means.
Well, I haven't thought about that. I didn't see the thing about solar arrays, but that's something that we definitely don't know about. We just don't know how many hours of sunlight in very sunny places like Kansas and Oklahoma. I think plants can get away with some partial shade at some point during the day. In other climates that are cloudier and stormier, further north or whatever, I don't know. My sense is it's more important to have less, shade. But again, I'd say whatever you would do for something like sweet corn or squash or sunflowers, things that are big plants, do that for these plants. The difference would be you can get away with a lot with like spinach or lettuce or kind of leafy things that don't need to do a lot of photosynthesis, that aren't producing seeds. But the crops, the plants that have to get enough energy to be able to build oil molecules and pack them into seeds, that does take quite a bit of solar energy. And so they do need quite a bit of light. But that's one of the things that we'll find out. And as long as we know, if someone just wants to go ahead and put it in a shaded place, well, we may find out that drives everything. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, that shade is the number one thing that leads to smaller plants or something. Well, that's something that we've learned. And so that's obviously we don't want anyone's plants to all die immediately, but failure it's not failure in a way. Like it's hard for you to fail because the failure means something, right? The crops may fail, but that doesn't mean you failed. That means we've learned something about the kind of conditions that they need. And that's what we don't know. We've grown them in certain places where and we grow them here because they work. And so that means we just don't know where they don't work. And so you'll help us figure that out. It's not, and they shouldn't all fail in the, I would guess that some may fail in some places and some may fail in other places, but don't be afraid if some of them die. That's something we need to learn.
Thank you, David. I'll just reflect that this type of community call in which we're exploring different possibilities, answering questions, realizing questions that might shape the types of resources that we provide. This is a very normal civic science experience as part of a project to have this kind of dialogue and back and forth and learning together. And also another part of civic science in terms of the data that's collected and submitted is the sharing back of results. So being able to visualize the data and put those maps together and allows civic scientists and other researchers to interact with those, use them, ask questions about them, and for us to share back the results of what we collectively are learning and the types of science and the types of stories that are emerging through this. That's also a big part of our civic science work. On the Land Institute's webpage, I wanted to point towards a few more resources that people might find of interest. So let's see if I can get that to work. On our, we have a particular interest form page. That's the landinstitute.org/engage with civic science with hyphens in between. That's where the interest form is for this and their projects. And there's a set of resources related to Perennial Atlas Project in particular, a whole document with frequently asked questions and answers to those, a video overview of the project, and a flyer in case you'd like to share about it. And then on our main civic science webpage, you can scroll down and check out the field guides for our current projects to get a sense of what projects look like. You can look at some publications related to civic science, including things that we've authored and co-authored with civic scientists to share their stories. And you can watch and look at some of the kind of results that we've generated so far. And then our email address, civicscience@landinstitute.org. We're always available to answer questions that might be specific to you or to give feedback or to share resources. If you're just interested in this method more broadly, even if you aren't participating in a project with us. This webinar has been recorded and we'll be sharing the recording back with you all as well as with other folks through the website. So I think we might have moved through all the information, all the questions, and we're pretty much on time. But if there are any unanswered questions, by all means, put them in the chat, stay on. We'll definitely address those before we wrap up. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Really perennially grateful to get to know you and to looking forward to the chance, I hope, to work together in this or future projects or collaborations as we work towards a better, more perennial future. Thank you. Bye.